what I wanted to talk about was how in the past I had not done so well with taxes. So thinking back to how I would go often a couple months without sending him the information and would go like way over the deadline. And
Mm.
the reason I did that is because I wasn't really sure how to compile everything. I had to go through all of my credit card statements, and I was just sort of dreading it. I knew I wasn't really going to pay taxes because it was a loss that year, and so I put it
Mm.
off. So I was this guy's my poor Jim, my tax guy. I was his absolute worst client. A couple years
Yeah.
ago, I think it was, he basically gave me an ultimatum. He was like, listen, you got to shape up or you need to find somebody else, which was absolutely
Wow.
fair of him to do. But I really was an issue. So when I think back to them, last year was the first year I used QuickBooks. So this year is much easier. There are a couple things I didn't do right about using QuickBooks that I'll try to correct this year. So it's not like my bank account isn't exactly what it's supposed to be per QuickBooks, although it's lower than it should be. So I'm not going to go dig into it and figure out why it was. I'm just going to reset for next year, for this year, and then figure it out, try to get better. But yeah, so when I think back to that, it was about that feeling of dread. And so I wanted to talk about two things. Number one is when you're putting something off. There are two ways to put something off, I think. One way is healthy and one way is not. A healthy way is when you say, this doesn't need to be done yet. I can do this at 4 p.m. or I can do this next Tuesday or I can do this in June. And it really can, like, that's fine. And you're not putting it off because you're dreading it or whatever. It's just, that's like, you don't need to do it right now. It's okay if you don't do it right now. And the other way is if you put it off because like, oh, I can't deal with that. I don't want to deal with that. And so you're just putting it off for that reason. And the difference, I think, is what happens in the meantime. Because in the meantime, it's draining mental energy still. So let's say you put something off for 2 hours and then you do it after 2 hours. Yes, you weren't spending all of your mental energy those 2 hours on it, but still, it took 2 hours of energy from you. And so that's the first thing. I remember those, like, dreading whenever his name would pop up in my inbox, like, oh no, I know, I really need to do this like 2 months ago, okay? And I would leave it on unread or different cases. And so I think that mental flag of when you put something off, like, how do you feel in that moment? Do you feel, is it draining you still or is it not draining you? And that tells you the difference. The other side is the very lovely feeling you get when you knock items off your to-do list in that way. Even things that are challenging that you're not.
I'm sorry, can you put it in this is a pet peeve of mine. Can you put it in the first person?
Sure. That's the lovely feeling I get when I knock items off my to-do list. Yeah, so when that happens, I feel like, there's so much time in my day. I could go read a book. I could go do something else. And it's because that task that you put off for 2 hours, it actually took 2 hours instead of the 30 minutes that it was going to take. It took 2 hours and 30 minutes because it was eating up hard drive space in your brain for those 2 hours. So this was just, I was thinking back to those days when I was really bad, and I want to be better next year because there are a couple things I want to correct.